No, this one right here. Okay, we're on. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. If you're watching on TV or calling in, please bear with us. This is going to be a little rough sledding here today, but we're going to get through it. So we are going to do the City Council work session. Maybe I was jinxed myself there, Matt. City Council work session agenda, Monday, March 30th, 2020, 4:30 p.m., Thomas J. Smith, Council Chambers, City Hall. On the proposed regular agenda, first up would be for April 6, 2020. First up is public hearing, consideration of sale of property locally known as 1021 North 8th, Burlington, Iowa, with conditions. Mr. Tislin, please.
This is a lot that we acquired probably a few months ago. This home had a failure in one of the walls. It basically crumbled in on itself. We acquired it, demolished it. The adjacent property owner would like to purchase the lot. So that's in your packet. Currently, we did send out notices. Currently only have one bid on it. With vacant lots, people either have to build a new house on it or combine it with an adjacent lot. So unless someone builds a new house here, it'd be either the owner to the north or south or split. And currently we've just had the owner, I believe, to the north have interest in acquiring the property.
Okay, far right there, Rich. All right. Anybody from council have any questions on that one? No? All right. And Mr. Tislin, you're up on the next one. Public hearing for consideration of sale of property locally known as 704 South Central, Burlington, Iowa, with conditions.
This is a vacant property we acquired a little while ago through 657A. Again, structure's been demolished. The adjacent property owner has expressed interest in it to expand their lot size. So that's what's shown in the packet. Unless something changes, we'd recommend selling to that adjacent neighbor for $500.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask which neighbor? Because it looks like the one is a pretty big lot already.
I think it's the neighbor to the north.
Okay. Yep. All right, thanks. Just was curious. Any questions, guys, for Eric?
Nope.
And by the way, if you're watching, Bill is over here, Robert's over here, the full council's here, so we are working. Number 3 is public hearing, consideration for property disposition with Merge LLC. Say your name, please.
Jim Furno. I live somewhere in town. I can't remember the address. I don't remember very many things. There is nothing in your packet, I don't think, but this is a follow-up to going through a development agreement with Merge for the development at the former PD site. They are looking to demo both that structure, buy that property from us, which this would be the disposition of that piece of property, combine it with a lot adjacent to it, demolish both of them, and put up a new structure. I think it's 56 residential upper story units, about a little over 5,000 square foot of commercial space on the first floor. Minimum assessment agreement on that, $5 million, looking for $450,000 towards demolition costs, which the council has already approved in a TIF amendment, along with a 10-year 100% TIF rebate, which with a maximum amount to be $2 million, would anticipate it would be more in the maybe $1.5 million range, possibly a little bit lower than that, based on that $5 million assessed value. The step next week after a public hearing, you would do a disposition of property, sell the property to Merge. Their proposal, the development agreement that was approved, called for that property to be turned over to them for $0. And again, as a reminder, we had previously looked at the idea that we were going to spend approximately $500,000 to do a demolition of just the PD site. This accomplishes that at a little bit cheaper price, and it gets a new building on the market. I know there are some cons with some folks would like to be able to save the adjacent structure, but that's not the business that Merge is in.
Sure.
Part of what they're doing, this is still a contingent process. They're going after workforce housing tax credits. Absent that, I don't know where this overall agreement is for them, whether they move forward or not. They have already closed on the adjacent property, so they have that property regardless.
Okay, good. Anybody have any questions for Jim? Thanks,
I'm
Jim.
one of those ones that wanted to save the gorgeous historical architectural elements of it, because once it's gone, and it really is truly striking.
Duly noted. Number 4, public hearing for consideration, is the chief out? I assume this is coming, oh, that's you. Okay, public hearing for consideration of proposed ordinance amending chapter 163A.07 of Burlington, Iowa Code of Ordinances concerning hearing rights in the case of junk vehicles. This will be the first reading. Eric?
This chapter was created, I think, a year and a half ago or so. It's a kind of in combination with our environmental nuisance, chapter 163. During the process, this is updated to deal with junk vehicles on private property. So this is separate from the police dealing with property or vehicles on the street or in right of way. This is just on private property. As we've started to enforce this a little bit more, one thing we noticed was just making sure we had the right to hearing within the code, and that was kind of an oversight from our review and our attorney's review that it referred back to chapter 163, which does have a notice of hearing, but it wasn't specifically explicit within the code. It was just more generalized that it shall follow the provisions of chapter 163. So we just wanted to make sure that was explicit and clear that if someone wants a right to a hearing, they're allowed a right to a hearing, but it shall follow the provisions under chapter 163 of the city code. So it was already there, it just wasn't explicitly clear, and we wanted to make sure as we're dealing with these junk vehicles that people knew they had a right to a hearing. So,
Okay. Guys, any questions?
Yeah, actually, junk would be inoperable or hasn't moved in a certain length of time, or?
yep, it has to have current registration plates or stickers, has to be able to be moved. Private property, if it's parked on a hard surface, they are allowed one vehicle that they're working on, kind of that auto racer type vehicle or a vehicle that they are working on. But if it's parked in the grass in the front yard, it doesn't have a motor or not operable, then that would be classified as a junk vehicle.
What are we doing, or does this address anything with mechanic shops, auto body shops that have junk vehicles lying around?
Well, this chapter would be in place to deal with it. This change that we're doing is just the right to hearing, so that this chapter is already in place.
Okay.
That's something we can deal with. They are aware they're, I guess we've had one come before the zoning board a couple times, and they've had a 6-month review for later this summer where we've had some complaints on it.
Okay, thank you.
And Eric, how do you identify most of these vehicles? Do neighbors turn them in, or do you guys routinely police turn them in?
Right now,
or-
it's mostly complaint basis, or if we're out and we're out quite a bit on rental inspections or nuisance inspections, and we see one that's clear. I know our zoning, our city planner also gets complaints on them that we try and deal with them as a department, so.
Okay, thank you.
Complaint always helps, because sometimes we aren't in all
You
the
don't
neighborhoods all the
see
time.
those
but,
little
yeah.
intricate ones. I was in another community, which will remain unnamed, about a month ago, and I noticed that in 2 houses, there were 5 derelict vehicles. And I was telling this person, you need to call those in, you need to call those in. Because it starts and then it just grows,
Yeah.
because one neighbor says, well, they're doing it, and so, yeah. So if you hear that, people, call it in, help
Yep.
us out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, number 5 is public hearing for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2020 Senior Center Roof Replacement Project. Hi, Nick.
Hi, I'll apologize, I don't have much of my material in the packet, so I'll have to be using that eventually. I will also, for the senior center roof, this is a CIP item in the budget for, I think, $78,000. I think an image of an aerial to show what we own, I think is a little bit bigger than what most people perceive as the frontage of the senior center. The roof area of the senior center is fairly big. It takes up more than just the frontage on Jefferson Street. It actually goes to the west. It turns kind of an L shape and fronts the alleyway in between. So I'll put an image in the packet so you guys can see that. Other than that, it's a similar roof project that we did out of Public Works. It's a rubber membrane roof with no ballast. We did have it tested for asbestos, and we didn't find any. There is the possibility that we could find it somewhere when we uncover, take off the old membrane. I don't think it's very likely, but $80,000 or $78,000 is what we have it as an estimated project. So this is sales tax funds that are used to pay for that. Maybe Jim needs to address the concerns on that, but we should probably replace this roof. We have some fairly sizable leaks in a couple of those areas, and I think only pushing that back will make the problem worse and inflation on cost of the roof. So, I know sales tax has been a conversation of concern from the city budgeting standpoint. So,
Okay.
oh, there you go. Thank you. I'll throw an image of that up.
Okay. Looks good.
I had heard the seniors might not be there long-term. I mean, if we do need to back this off because the budget is in dire straits with this virus, I don't know, just something maybe to consider.
Probably still makes sense to do it anyway, though, otherwise we're gonna end up with a building that's not worth anything due to water
It's being
damage.
damaged.
Yeah, I don't know how bad it is. I know it leaks some.
There's a couple of big leaks in there. I mean, I don't think the building's gonna fall down anytime soon because you don't take care of it, but as we know out at Public Works, those roofs, as they start to get leaks, they only continue to grow. And the amount of water that you see is more. But I don't think it's damaging anything of importance. I don't think it's over top of any sort of electric panels or computerization. I mean, they don't have it in there, so.
Yes.
Well, but it'll
But it's-
eventually get into insulation
Correct.
and
Yeah, it's-
drywall and that stuff, and then you'll end up with a bigger problem.
Yep. Any other questions for Nick? Jim, do you have something to add on that? Please do.
Yeah, but there's a memo that I put in with a couple of the items that are on here, just in regards to financing. And, I don't know really what to expect yet out of this. We're 2 weeks in to an economy that has gone through a major shakeup. It sounds like we have at least 4 more weeks based off what the president announced over the weekend for his timeline, with the potential for that to be extended longer. I don't know where that leads us with a lot of our revenue streams. Hotel motel, we've had some conversations preliminarily that would say that instead of the 900,000 that we were planning on getting this year, it's realistically going to be 700,000 or less. And I can see that being the case. Local option sales tax, just the way payments go, we get 12 payments during the course of the year. The final payment that we get for June collections, we receive in, I think, August is when that comes. And then we get a true-up for the year that we don't receive until November. The state tries to hold back 5% of their expected collections, so that there's a little bit of sway depending on whether the year ends well or poorly, and it takes them about 4 months to get to where they can reconcile and know where they stand. That 5% is a couple of $100,000 if it hits right at 5%. We're in a type of year where they base projections looking at what last year's was, and we were ahead of that the first part of this year. If you look at what happened in China, they lost 20% of retail sales. We're not China. We have a different demographic. I don't know what that means for our retail sales, but you can't have the size of shutdown in local businesses. People can buy online, but they're not buying to the same extent. We're going through, I don't know where our unemployment claims are going to end up, but that's going to drive what happens with people's discretionary income and what happens with sales. We can very easily have a $500,000 swing in local option sales tax from one year to the next, and I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't on that end or a little bit higher for local option sales tax. If you think through, we were on a trend where we were gradually coming up on hotels revenue. If you go down 200,000, we know that it'll come back, but in all likelihood, it is not going to come back at that 900,000 plus a percent or two. It's going to be at some level below that. How much below, we don't know, because I don't know what the dynamics are for how people are going to act over time. But social distancing is something that people are just going to be leery of over the course of this next year. That's being said to say that we're very likely gonna see, just from those two sources, you could see a $700,000 hit to an annual operating budget. I don't know what happens with gambling revenues. It's $40,000 a month while everything's closed down. I assume that it picks back up after a couple of months, but I don't think it'll probably be quite at the same level. Again, I think you're gonna have some of those social distancing impacting at least to some extent, plus you're gonna have a higher unemployment rate, you're gonna have a little less discretionary income for folks. We have a lot of different sources that are gonna be impacted, and when you think about hotel motel tax, it in and of itself, the majority of that funds ongoing operations for the Recplex, the golf course, the chamber. The chamber's gonna want some assistance. They haven't come and asked for it, but they probably will when they have a budget that has a $50,000, $60,000 swing in revenues, trying to make their budget work. It's going to the general fund to support operations. We're gonna have a significant impact here. I just don't know what it's gonna be. That being said, it means we know that we have to reprioritize projects. We've put out that I think that we need to put our capital purchases on hold. That being said, with a roof, I don't see how you don't do a roof. It's on the higher end of things in terms of when you try to figure out where you're putting your funding between items. And it's not like we're not gonna buy any capital equipment. We're gonna have to do it. It's just we're gonna have to make some adjustments to it. And we just don't know what until we see where this puts us.
Sure.
That's all I had on it.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Any good news for us, Jim?
All right, next up is public hearing for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2020 West Avenue and Gear Avenue Dal Bar retrofit project. Nick?
Mr. Malpin, would you like to, you got it? Sweet, appreciate
You
that.
can count on Eric.
He's helping me out left
Yeah.
and right. So the Dal Bar retrofit project is one, and you'll see this item come up here in the next work session council, is a memorandum of understanding with West Burlington. We reached out to them because their roadway suffers from the same issue that West Avenue and Gear does on our section. So that's the reason for the map. This project on our end is a little bit smaller, but in total, we have it estimated at $603,000. We have it broke up in two different divisions. We're the bigger chunk. We have a lot more square footage to cover. We're at $362,000 for an estimate. This will all be covered, the percentages and the dollars of what responsibilities will be, that'll be covered in the MOU. Did you take that other image that I put up there? Just to give an idea what a Dal Bar retrofit is, we have a cross-section from SUDAS, which is the design standards that we follow. So we would go in and replace a section of concrete, replace it with put dowel bars, 3 of them in each of the drive paths. So there'll be a total of 12 in each section, and then we'll actually have some sections it's built into our estimate. Some sections where the panels are kind of busted up, and it makes more sense just to replace them. The intersection is probably the bigger cost. That wasn't really anticipated when we kind of talked about this project when we started doing the design on it. But this is kind of what we're intending to do, and then do a diamond grind on top to help smooth out the surface. So I can answer any questions on that if you like.
Are we gonna shut down West Avenue?
It doesn't
Entire-
need to. They actually do. We've talked to one of the people that does a lot of the work, and they typically run pilot cars. So they'll shut down a section of lane, and then they'll signage and then run people around it. So there'll still be access on the roadways. Gosh, when we talked to them, they said they can knock out a lot of linear feet in a day. So they're able to go in there and cut out the sections they need, get it prepped, and then dowel bar it and pour it back pretty quick like.
So, remind me, because I know we went in depth about the reasons why for this. So because of the wavy road, and we're worried about it busting up, is that correct?
Yeah, so the reason why we looked at doing this project isn't from a rideability standpoint. There is an issue there. It's more of a structural concern of trying to hold that roadway together, trying to preserve it at this stage rather than letting it become much worse and having the panels start to break up. Because the concrete's still in pretty good shape for as old as the age of the road is.
How old is that road? Any idea?
It's got to be at least 15 years.
Okay.
So the concrete's holding up fairly well, given the conditions that you see in the rideability.
Okay.
And then you said West Burlington's doing their section, or?
Yeah, so you'll see a memorandum of understanding come through. So they'll be doing it. It'll be one project. So similar to the way we did Mount Pleasant Street asphalt and then Agency Street, where both agencies own portions of the roadway.
Okay.
We have run the project from a contract standpoint and overseen the work. They simply just write us a check
That's
to.
awesome.
And there's,
I mean-
there's no grants or anything tied to this?
There is not.
Okay, all right, thanks. Anybody else have any questions for Nick?
Is there any thought that West Burlington may have to, because of budget, pull out of it?
From when I talked with Mr. Gifford, it was they were using some excess borrowing monies from when they did when they did one of their projects. It didn't come in as high as they expected it to, so it looks like they're using some reserve funds to pay for it.
Do you have something to add, Jim? 6 foot apart, fellas, let's go.
What
Especially
section-
you, Nick, you were saying.
What section of the roadway is theirs? A little over half?
Yeah, it's the purple, I guess.
So they'll pay for, if it's about 660,000 project engineered estimate,
It's right in front of you if you
So-
want to unfold it, if you want to touch my materials.
603,000.
Better wash it.
I'll wash my hands at some point. They'll pay a little over half of that. Our portion is, we're borrowing 1.4 million for street projects this year. We're paying for that through the bonds that we're selling, which is a later item. The bonds right now have not been able to be sold. We refinanced our existing debt. We didn't place them as bonds, as a private placement with a bank. That may end up being what happens with our bond sale too, for the new money. Just the way the markets are right now, things aren't acting the way they normally would. Could you put that image back up from the SUDA standards? Nick, could you show me where it says hippity skippity on there?
I was gonna ask, is that gonna eliminate the hibbity skibbity?
It will.
Sorry, I just had to.
It's a Nebraska
I just-
term.
That word's gonna be in Webster Dictionary next.
Again, we're gonna have to prioritize projects. I think at this point, we just move forward with this. This is something that needs done. We have the financing in place to do it. As long as the financing is able to get placed, I think that we move forward with it.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? All right, moving on. Next one up is public hearing for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2020 Virginia Avenue and Sycamore Street stormwater improvements. Nick?
So these plans and specs, it's actually, it's two issues in different places, but they're very similar issues along the bluff on the north side of town. I marked both of those locations by red dots. Virginia is up on the north side. It dies off right now. There really isn't any storm sewer there, whereas the further section south on Sycamore, there is some storm sewer, but it is undersized and I think has seen some erosion in there. And so we call out that. If you want to show kind of the general idea, I think first one that I gave you is, it gives you, we're doing work at the end of the roadway and taking it down the bluff through kind of Carl A. Nelson's lot and then tying it into existing storm sewer. So that's what the work is. And then I think the next one kind of gives an idea of where it's at. You can see the contours there. That's those dashed lines. Shows you the grade that we're working at. There's a displaced pipe somewhere in the middle there, and so it's causing some more erosion problems. So these two projects are shoved together because they're very similar in nature. We had Klingner and Associates do the plans and specs for us. The estimated combined cost is $81,000, and we'll use our miscellaneous sewer money. It's sanitary and storm sewer water. So.
Okay. Any questions for Nick, gang? No? Thank you, Nick. Number 8 is resolution approving loan agreement for authorizing the issuance of $5,660,000 general obligation refunding bond, Series 2020A, and providing the levy of taxes to pay the same. I struggle on those big ones.
This one, as well as the one following it, is another financing for how much? A little over 4 million?
Yeah, the other one's 4.2.
So one of them is taxable and the other is a tax exempt for investment purposes. These are pure refinancings. It doesn't extend the life of the loans or of the bonds at all. It's repaying them on the same schedule. When Travis had gone through this, from Piper Sandler now, had gone through this, they were looking, I think what he displayed up here was about a $300,000 savings. He was hoping to get about a $350,000. With the placement, we're looking at between the two issues, a total of about $315,000. A little bit better than what he showed, not as much as what he really hoped that we were going to get on it. If we'd have been in the market 3 or 4 weeks sooner before everything went haywire, we'd have saved a little bit more, but I think we've done pretty well, and it's enough to justify moving forward with the refinancing.
Okay. Any questions, guys? That takes care of 8 and 9, and then 10, Jim, is resolution authorizing bond purchase for agreement for 5.6, that's the same number, 5.655, general obligation corporate purpose bond, Series 2020C.
Yeah, Series 2020C is new money for our existing capital improvement plan items for fiscal year 2021. 4.2 million for flood improvements, extending the flood wall from at both the north and the south end of what was constructed in the last phase, going across the short line railroad tracks at both the north and south end. And then 1.4 million for street projects, the Dow retrofit that was just mentioned, and then Central being the other major component. I think there's some smaller pieces of street work that Nick had identified as
Okay.
going along with that.
Any questions, guys?
Hey, Jim, I know we've refinanced some things, but the 5.655 is the only new money this year, right? Was
Yeah.
it the only new money borrowing? How
Yes.
much did we pay off this year? Any idea?
Stephanie, do you know what we have set to, I mean,
We pay off about that, at least that much every year.
yeah, we have,
4 to 5 million.
I'd have to even look.
I know last year was the first year we paid off more than we borrowed in a long time, because that was kind of a hooray moment for us, but I just was curious, wanted to make sure, wanted to know if we were still continuing that trend.
Okay.
And then you'll have to clarify as you look through that, Stephanie, whether you're just looking at geo-backed debt or
Yeah, Geo is 5.3.
5.3 million in geo debt that was paid for, principal that was paid for this year or last year?
That'll be coming up June 1st.
This year.
Okay.
And then we pay off, I don't know what our principal is on the sewer side. And when you're saying the 5.3 million, that's a combination of TIF debt and,
Yeah, in here it doesn't have the sewer.
we don't have the sewer on that, but it's, I
But
wanna
that's more
say
than-
it's a little over a million.
Okay.
That we paid for on principal on the sewer side this last year.
Okay, thank you.
And, yeah, we have taken on, I would say we've been taken on a significant amount of debt. When you think through the flood wall project, it, in and of itself, the first series was set a little over $7 million to do the first phase of that project, and we're doing $4 million here, and we have a couple of phases after this. Again, as we go through dynamics of what happens with our economy, I don't think we're getting state flood money. We got a payment in November. I need to submit a form for request of the next payment. Actually, it might have come after November. is for the first quarter of this year. We can get one more quarter that we should get. I don't anticipate we'll get any more this year, and I would be surprised if we get any money next year out of that fund. So as this moves forward, I think that that's going to be a dynamic to track. And again, what is this, where are we at on an economy? Is this just a downturn, or is this more like the 2008 recession? If it's that kind of level, we have some significant issues coming down the road to try to figure out where we deal with things. I just think that we need to be careful, and yet we still have to do our needed projects, which is where you see a lot of infrastructure projects that we're saying still move forward on. We have the financing in place to do them.
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Jim. All right, next is the proposed consent agenda. Number one is a resolution approving the intergovernmental transfer of public funds agreement between Iowa Department of Human Services and the city of Burlington. Is that you?
That's me.
Okay.
So this is just.
Hi, Chief.
Yeah. Good evening. So
Good
this
evening.
is that same agreement I had maybe a month or so ago, but it was the wrong version. So they updated it. It's for the GEMT program. It's kind of hard to explain, but we have to upfront some of the money and then they pay us back. So we made our first payment for this year on Friday. We start submitting claims. Well, we're supposed to start on the 1st. We actually submitted a few on accident last week. We've already got paid for those, so.
Good.
The program is going to work, which
Make
is
more
great.
accidents like that.
Yeah, so every year we have to redo this intergovernmental transfer agreement. Just allows us to give some money to the Iowa Department of Human Services, so they get a 40% cut or thereabouts
Okay.
of the GEMT funding, so.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for the chief?
Good to see you, Chief.
Yeah, good to see
Thanks,
you.
chief.
Thanks.
All right, number two on the consent is resolution approving the purchase of temporary construction easements for the 2019 Lewis Street Sewer Repair Project.
Hey, I just looked up Hibbity Skibbity, and it's a children's book about Easter. Hibbity Dibbity is something else entirely. You can look that up.
So the resolution in front of you for the temporary easements, I spoke about a couple weeks ago. We will be in there into the person's yard right off Lewis Street, tearing up their yard to where our sewer line is. We probably have an existing easement in the general area, but as much excavation as we're gonna have to do with this project, we are purchasing, we actually have two easements in there. I think the total is $52,000 or $5,298. That changes the conversation, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does.
So we'll use that, the sewer funds that we're using to pay for the project to pay for the easement as well.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Nick on that one? No? Number three is a resolution approving cooperative agreement with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources for the US FWS Boating Infrastructure Grant. Mr. Tislin, or Jim? Who's jumping?
This is a grant we've been working on for quite some time through the DNR, or working with the DNR for design of docks along the riverfront. I guess some of the particulars does have the city contributing $125,920 towards this, with the DNR contributing $200,000. The end date on the agreement is June 30th of 2022, but again, this is just for design. Is that right?
you're gonna make me take over. So, all these projects along the riverfront were all kind of pulled in together, and V&K helped us to design an awful lot of that based off of the visions that were put together from our local committee. They also had an idea of where they could go after for funding to make a lot of these different pieces happen. That has proven very successful, and this is one of the pieces that fit in very well. The idea of the boating infrastructure grant was to promote tourism on the Mississippi River, and so they're willing to pay a portion of the cost for doing the extended dockage there, and to add on restroom facilities to the port building, because their idea is that those then would be available to people who tied up at the dockage to use. Would expand usage along through there. You could potentially have people who docked overnight. You might not like it up at the marina, I don't know how that works, but it doesn't pay for the entire project.
Yeah.
As you see here, we're paying $125,000, they're contributing $200,000. And I can't remember the percentage that was in the documents that we were working with them, but they were looking at, as we're looking at a project that's about a $4 million overall cost. They're willing to pay a portion, but they want us to pay a portion. Ours is at least $700,000. We may, in coverage of a portion of the rest out of Tiger funds. We very well could be, when you go through a bid process, be responsible for a larger amount than $700,000. This is a spot where this is not a necessary piece of construction. This isn't something that needs to be done, but it's still here. It's something that this group has been working on. You had approved moving forward with it a year and a half ago, but then it's taken a year and a half to get this agreement based off of that to get to even where you can authorize consideration of signing the agreement. I just think, given the circumstances that we're facing as a community, this is a spot where I would say we just can't afford this. But again, this is, we don't know where we are going through our current issues. We don't know what may happen with things. I just think that this is a spot where, when we're looking at things that we're going to potentially have to be cutting out of a budget, this is an $800,000 piece that doesn't have to happen.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, taking the city council hat off for a second, I love the project, love the fact that there would be more docking there, but I do have some concerns with it. One is, we've lost some poles this year, shearing off with the ice. So that's one issue. And the other thing is, quite honestly, I don't think you're gonna have anybody stay overnight at that dock, because that's where the most current is at. It's coming right off the piers of the bridge. It's rough when you're docking there for an extended period of time. So unless they could get in to us, or they'll probably go do it on an island and run their generator rather than dock there overnight. I almost guarantee it. Because the other thing is, the barges are running hard all night long. So I have some concerns with that. As far as the overnight docking, I just don't think you're gonna see it.
Now, Jim, do we need those docks for those tourism boats to come?
no.
Okay.
No, we have 2 tie-ups. We'd still have to construct another tie-up to make it happen, but it's not going to cost us $800,000 to do that. This is a nice amenity. It is a neat thing that will set off that area, but it's not necessary either, so. Matt, I know you've got a lot of passion on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the docks were the biggest, one of the biggest attractions to the downtown riverfront redevelopment. In large part because when the plans were put together, we were trying to figure out how we can connect people with the water once we put a wall up.
Yeah.
So this was a big part of doing that. I view the docks as something that we can expand upon, especially with riverfront engagement in the future. I mean, John's opinion is important with regard to tying off and things like that, but I do view it as something that people would potentially tie off to, even if it's not for staying the night, but perhaps they come up here and park and stay the day and use amenities in the downtown area, and then they take off for the evening and find a more suitable place to tie up for the evening. So, and I'm a big fan of using leverage dollars, especially outside dollars, for investment in our community. And I think that it is a large expense, but I think that the expense over a longer period of time would be well worth it. So I would support continuing with that piece.
Is this something we could revisit and come back to if we have to skip it for the time being?
No.
We need to get the agreement
No, this
in
is
place.
part of, if this doesn't happen, it needs to be built to some extent into what the Tiger grant is. Taking it out is a pretty quick elimination, but you don't just add it in.
Okay.
So that's one of the bigger pieces of it. We end up, if we weren't to do this and tie it into Tiger and have it be a separate item, we'd have a larger local match. The grant was a total of, it's $200,000 on the front end and then 1.5 million for construction. and that was on like a $4.2 million estimated project. If you're not using Tiger funds on it, you're looking more like 2 million for our local costs. And that's where I still have concerns about how much of that he's actually built.
Right, that's the biggest conversation of it all, is the timing of the Tiger grant.
Yes.
On how you make that dockage.
And I'm not sure how much that they've really even built in the Tiger into this, because as Leo has done a lot of this on the V&K side, I've been worried that we're gonna end up with a higher match than the 700,000 anyway.
Well, the last time I talked to Leo about that, specifically how we were gonna make that relationship work, was about 4 months ago, and unless something has changed, he seemed pretty optimistic that the match was gonna be pretty minimal, timing wise.
He's pretty optimistic when it comes to funding on stuff, but, yeah.
So if we approve this, we're
I
looking
mean,
at.
it's not that it can't happen, it's just that I think there are some additional risks that we're gonna have a little bit more than the 700,000 to cover. But if we do it and we move forward, it happens and we make it work. But I don't think that you go and do the planning grant if you're not planning on doing the actual construction on it. So you gotta,
Yeah. Again, I view that piece as being the catalyst for a lot of things that we're trying to do down there. So for me, it's important that be a part of that. I mean, that's where I stand on the deal.
I think as far as tourism dollars go, it won't take us too long to recoup all that money and then some. So I'm passionate about this process as well. It's a lot of unknowns right now in the budget, but I do think we need to tie this in with Tiger and leverage that money and hit the go light now. I think if we wait, it's gonna cost a lot more to say no and wait.
So let me see a show of heads, a nod or yes. So we leave it on the consent? Yes?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah?
I agree with Matt,
Yeah.
this is a vital piece of the whole puzzle, like,
Okay.
this is what we're doing.
My personal opinion is right now we have to look at everything, and I would like to save the money, but that's up to me, that's my opinion.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll leave it on the consent, and if someone has an objection, we can bring it back up. Thank you, everybody. Number 4 is resolution approving contract for services of the Southeast Iowa Regional Planning Commission for the administration of the technical services associated with the TAMA 2 project at 300-310 Jefferson. Hi, Mr. Tislin.
Hello. So this is directly related to the CDBG funds for the TAMA 2 project. Doug Wells is moving forward. As part of the grant award, he got $2.5 million. The state did set aside specifically $51,020 for administration with the City of Burlington and Regional Planning Commission. So they have a not to exceed contract here of $51,020. So they do the environmental assessment, a lot of the monitoring, the reports, financial statements for this project. Very critical part that they're able to do for it, provided it moves forward. So this is just kind of a sub-agreement with them for that part of the project.
Anybody have any questions? No? All right. Number 5 is a resolution rejecting all bids for the 2020 Dankworth Park Tennis Court resurfacing project.
So we received one bid for this project, $182,100, which was just slightly lower than our estimate from All Weather Courts. They've done other work for us, done a very good job. We have Starker funds set aside for $105,000 of this. So the remaining balance was kind of to be determined. We have had some communication with a member of a tennis association that's trying to still do fundraising on that. So he's trying to establish his 501c3, contacted some foundations and looking at some private funds. He's hopeful that he has around $60,000, but until we know that exact amount or have that in hand, we don't know. So I don't know if we wanted to recommend tabling this or.
I was gonna say, I just talked to him right before the meeting. He has $67,760 committed for the project. His 501c3 paperwork, as soon as it comes, he has his dollars committed to help fund the project, would bring our liability to about $9,000. So I'd like to see us still move forward with this project, assuming that those dollars do come in.
Yeah, we, in our communication wanted.
That's where you're saying to table it.
Yeah.
make sure those commitments are, I guess, full, that they're not just someone saying this is,
yes.
we want to see those dollars somehow, or some manner, or some agreement of some
Yeah,
sort.
majority is a list of people who I saw had committed were pretty reputable.
Yeah,
and been
yeah.
part of other things in the past, so.
So if we table it, we all right with this particular vendor?
Yeah, they're someone we've worked with pretty closely
Okay.
before and feel comfortable with them. Again, this is redoing the courts to have a 25-year warranty on it, provided we repaint every 5 years, 6 years. And that's something I think that'll make these courts a long-lasting amenity for our community.
I'm with you, Matt. We have Starker funds, and we have Mr. Japson's out there fundraising. Thank you, Brian. We have him come through in 9,000. We've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
that I've been around, and at least us two anyway. Matt and Linda, we've been around for 3 years now, so I'm of the mood of going forward if those donations come through and he gets his 501(c). So if we could table it and keep them in, the vendor in pocket or the contractor in pocket, I'd be willing to see if he can't work that out. You?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and major applause to him. It just kind of shows how passionate a lot of people are in the community about this particular project. It's always nice to be able to do a project where it's a quality of life improvement overall before it's an infrastructure improvement.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we were talking making up all 77,
Yeah.
it would be no for me. But if we're talking making up a small portion of that, I'm willing to wait and see how he does and see if we can't get through there, so.
All right.
So I would say table it. Where are we at on that as a group? Table? Yeah, so
All right.
we'll pull that off the consent and table it for now, and hopefully we can circle back.
All right.
Thanks, Eric.
Tennis is still a game you can play and stay away from people too.
Is that all right to do that, Jim? I should have checked with you, make sure we're good on it. I just like to see you get up and walk back and forth.
What's that?
As far as tabling it, we're okay to do that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, just
all right.
a move to table, and you're hoping to bring it back the following meeting if you have
Okay.
everything in line.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And if you knew that it was the next meeting, it would be to the next meeting, and I guess you could still continue it to the one after it if you're still waiting for
Okay,
him to get through that process of establishing the 501c3.
Yep.
sounds good, thank you. That would make me happy. Number 6 is resolution approving the Urban Deer Management Program. Chief, there he is.
We doing it?
Hi, I actually have Sergeant Stern here, and he'll be in a minute, but he's going to do a presentation. Last winter, we talked about the deer management zone that was requested, and we put together a program and how we think it can best operate. So just so you're aware of that, we have to have the letter requesting that that deer management zones to the state by the end of April. So our timing should be right. And the resolution that's in front of you, and I believe she sent you the packet of the PowerPoint, so you should have most of that information in there. And Sergeant Stern has put the program together for the most part, and we've met some with Mr. Tislin and the Parks Department to kind of lay out some of these zones. So if there's anything in there that you see that's that you have questions about, we'll be here to answer those. Sergeant Stern is going to come in and kind of go over the basics of it. Is not all inclusive with the rules, but it should lay out the foundation for how we're going to manage that and attempt to do that this fall if the resolution goes through.
Okay.
Sergeant?
Good afternoon.
Hi, Sergeant. Hi.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Awesome. Well, I will not bore you. I am not a PowerPoint guy. I hate PowerPoints, so I'm going to zip right through this since you guys have it in front of you. Obviously, if you have any questions or anything, feel free, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability for you. Oh. Obviously, our purpose and our intent was to reduce the deer population within the city limits of Burlington, but we also want to do it in a safe manner for the hunters and the population of Burlington. what I put together here is just some of the overview of the rules that we have. Each hunter has to possess a Iowa hunting license. Each hunter must submit a City of Burlington Urban Deer Management Permit application. Each hunter must attend the hunter safety meeting tentatively scheduled for August 15th at the police department. Each hunter must successfully pass an archery proficiency test each year.
What's the percentage on that, Sergeant?
For the archery
proficiency.
proficiency, 4 out of 5 at 20 yards. You have to put 4 out of 5 arrows in a 8.5-inch circle
Okay.
at 20 yards.
Thank you.
Each hunter must have written permission from a landowner. Permission forms must be shown upon request. Each hunter will be provided a placard to be placed in the driver's side dash of their vehicle while they're hunting. If hunting on city-owned property, the hunters are required to utilize a body harness. City property available for hunting will be marked with signage including boundaries. Hunters wishing to hunt on city property will need to call the shift commander on duty prior to hunting and check the availability of the stand locations. And then also call when they're done hunting that evening. All shots must be taken from an elevated tree stands. They have to be at least 5 foot off the ground. We want the downward trajectory of the arrows. Stands must be portable with no permanent stands erected, no screw-in steps, lags, and that kind of stuff. All stands must be labeled with the hunter's name and the City of Burlington permit number that they will be issued. All stands must be located at least 100 feet from the roads, recreational trails, and property lines and occupied buildings. Hunters shall identify their target as an antlerless doe. Obviously, that's what we're focusing on. We want them to make sure that they mark all their arrows and their fletches with their permit number in case we have one that comes up missing or the guy bounces off or whatever. We can identify who it belongs to. And we don't want them field dressing the deer in the city limits. The check-in procedure, they'll have to get a hold of the on-duty shift commander. They'll bring the deer to the south parking lot of the police department. They have to have their ID, their permit, their landowner permission form, their valid hunting license, a valid deer tag through the state, and then identify on a map where the deer was harvested at. To just kind of make it safe and true, we want them to mark the left ear of the deer in the presence of the shift commander so that we know that that deer came from within the city limits of Burlington. As with the DNR, they still will have to register their deer just like they would on a regular deer hunt. And if they have a wounded deer, they need to contact the hunt manager within 12 hours and give a location of where that deer was last seen at. If they're retrieving a deer goes across private property, they shall make every attempt to notify the owner of that property before retrieving that deer. If they can't get a hold of the property owner, then they'll contact the on-duty shift commander and we will proceed with whatever processes we need to do. This is always a big one. A hunter shall remove himself or herself immediately from any harassment situation with another hunter or citizen and report the incident to the DNR and to the hunt managers. Hunters shall report violators of any rules or regulations to the deer hunt manager and to the conservation officer. We do want to get our youth involved in this. So hunters 14 to 17 must be in the presence of an adult that is 18 or older that has met the urban deer hunting requirements also.
So they have to pass the proficiency, yes?
Yes, they do. Hunters can access the GIS for mapping of the approved areas of public land here within the city. And we did put in there that hunters wishing to hunt in Dankert or in Crapo will be allowed to hunt beginning October 15th. So it's about a month later than what the full city hunt is scheduled. And this is just a GIS view of what land is available to hunt. This is Bonds Hollow. We have two sections there. This is Dane Street Tower. It'd be east of Dane Street, or east of the tower, I'm sorry, behind the Y there. This is the Dankert and Crapo parks that are available. And this is the Gunnison Street sewer section off of Agency Street. Now what this is this is just a, this is the application for the permit. The individuals will have to fill this out. We'll do a background check on them. They'll bring this with them when they go to the safety meeting. Once the safety meeting is completed, then we'll go out to Dankert Park for the archery proficiency test. This is the permit for private landowners. Has to be signed by the landowner, and this has to be carried with the hunter at all times.
Sergeant, refresh me on the private, so they have to acquire that before they can go to private, like if someone's got a big acreage in town, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll use like Aspen Grove as an example.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
They would
gotcha.
need to get with Aspen Grove and get permission to hunt on that land. And once they receive that permission, the landowner or the manager of that property would sign off on
Okay.
this, and then they're good to go.
All right.
This is just what the placard's going to be looking like. We'll put it on, different cardstock to change it up every year if we need to. But that's to be placed in their dash, on their driver's side, so that if we have an issue that comes up, whether it be a medical emergency or whatever else, we know at least a starting spot of where we need to go to find the individual and who the individual is, cell phone numbers, et cetera, et cetera. That's all I have on that.
Okay, guys, questions?
Do you have to approve the tree stand locations then?
No.
Okay.
When you say temporary tree stands, what are we talking about? I mean, I've hunted out of numerous tree stands, and trust me, I don't know that I want them to be temporary. I want them to be strapped,
Well, a temporary tree stand would be like your ladder stands,
so they are strapped.
Yeah, they are strapped
Okay.
on there. A self climber, anything that's not actually bolted into the tree.
And are we going to require them to take them down and put them up after each hunt?
No.
Okay.
They can be put out a week before the hunt starts,
And they have
and
to-
if the individual chooses to leave them out there, they're more than welcome to. We have in the rules that they have to have their name
Tag.
and their tag number and everything on those stands.
But if they leave it in place and someone pilfers it, that's their problem.
Well, exactly. And,
Right.
once we go through the safety meeting, I'm going to definitely recommend to people that if they choose to leave it out there, that they chain it on, get a padlock, lock it on there, make sure they have it all numbered and everything, because the last thing you want to do is you want to go out and have some of your property taken.
The only suggestion I had after I read it was, I know we're saying adult does only in 2020. I'd like to see us have some kind of avenue where people can hunt antlered deer, and perhaps even have a 2 or 3 doe requirement before they can take an antlered deer.
Yeah, and that's actually in the 2020 or 21-22 rules. The first year we want to focus on the does. We want to try to get the does down. As an incentive for those hunters, if they take 3 does in the 2021 season, they are then eligible for that buck tag next year.
Okay.
So this first year, we're solely focusing on the doe population.
Okay.
So during this 4-month period, will there be additional signage placed at these spots, or?
That's the plan. We want to mark the boundaries and make sure that everything is as safe as it can be for the public.
Okay.
I believe we talked about actually closing off certain areas also out at like Danquert Park and out in Crayville.
Yeah, and then I'm also thinking the bike trails behind the Y. Some of those guys move pretty quick.
Yeah.
They might not know initially till it gets going that this is going on.
So it's a private ground. I mean, I just have to go through the proficiency, get my city tag and permit, and then put a placard in my vehicle, and then I can work out with a homeowner where I put the stand as long as it's not within 100 feet of any structure, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I'm 100% for hunting, but I'm totally against this program because of the landowners. And what are you gonna do to protect those rights that we don't want people coming across our land?
Well, obviously, if there's a problem with anything, they can contact, if one of our hunters is doing something that is inappropriate, they will be, their permit would be suspended, they wouldn't be allowed to hunt. If they violated any hunting laws or rules, their permission to hunt within the city would be revoked for 5 years. And they would have the DNR conservation issues that they would have to take with. Obviously, if they're trespassing onto somebody else's property here within the city of Burlington, we will address that as we need to.
Are you talking, Bill, more about the retrieving a deer when they shoot it, it doesn't drop right away and you gotta go get it?
And I'm taking my own situation into account. I have 3 acres. I have 2 horses. I don't want a hunter coming onto my property. And especially, I went through this before where they cut fences down to get through our property, et cetera. I don't want that. I have signage all around my property, private property, do not enter. Will the police department then, if I find somebody on my property, will they deal with it in a normal way? But even if they're saying, well, I'm chasing a deer.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because one of the things, though, if that individual, and I'll just go hypothetical with you, if that individual shoots a deer and it crosses onto your property line, they cannot cross that property line. That hunter can't cross that property line until they've made contact with you or until they've made contact with law enforcement.
So is law enforcement then gonna contact me?
Yeah, we're going to do everything we can to make contact with you. And then if we can't make contact with you, we're going to see what else we have to do to rectify that situation.
Essentially, you would just escort them onto the property, retrieve the deer, and then get off the property.
If we would need to, I could see that probably happening.
Because you don't want to leave. The last thing you want is for somebody to take a deer, and then you go out to cut your grass and find a deer sitting in the yard.
No, Matt, the last thing I want is somebody coming on my property without my permission. That's the last thing I want.
Yeah.
Well, and as a property owner, you absolutely have that right. If you do not want anybody on your property, then so be it. And if somebody does trespass on your property, obviously you would want to get a hold of the law enforcement, and we would investigate it and go from whatever point we need to. But yes, there would be ramifications for a hunter to come onto your property that as a hunter, he wouldn't want to jeopardize his ability to hunt here in town. If that makes sense to you.
But if you walked on to go knock on the front door and say, "Hey, I took a deer and it's laying in your backyard,"
And that's exactly what we want somebody to do.
Yep.
Okay. Does that alleviate some of your fears?
Yeah, I'm worried, in the area I live, there's quite a few landowners. And I personally, I've seen where our fences have been cut. People going through. I don't want other people to have to deal with that.
See, I think the difference though here would be, for me, and I'm not a hunter. I cook for hunters, but I'm not a hunter.
I'm gonna remember that.
You should. The difference for me here is that these folks, what you were dealing with is a person that's not licensed to hunt in town, and these guys would be licensed. So they have all their information. If there's a guy out there hunting in your area, he's got to report that he's in that area, the Dane area, whatever area you're talking about. He's got to report that he's there, and then if fences are cut and everything else, so first eyes are going to be on him. So that I see where that is worthwhile, and I've always marveled at the law enforcement's ability to find me whenever they've needed to get a hold of me because of buildings and everything else. So, as long as we had to have permission, and if they the hunter can't get a hold of you, but they have to get a hold of law enforcement, I'm a little bit.
I'm better with that.
I'm better with that, yeah.
Yeah, I actually added that in there just towards the last there, just for that reason, because we have resources at our disposal that if they call us, I can look in our information system because we have
You
a
can
lot.
find me.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, so, and it's not just you, for other people, and if, rather than them knocking on the door and say, well, nobody answered, I'm just going. You know,
Yeah.
that's not gonna be allowed. We'll just, they have to call us and say, I've tried to contact the landowner, can't get a hold of them. We'll try to use our resources to immediately do that. Because if the deer has died on your property, that's not gonna change the circumstance. It's not an immediate deal. So it'd give you an opportunity to say, hey, I don't want them on my property. There may be a dead deer on your property that you have to deal with, but, you know, if you don't want somebody on your property, you don't want them on there.
And I think a lot of us that do own some acres in town, that makes us feel better. That
Okay.
alleviates a lot of issues, because there has been times where others have not, respected the fence and everything like that, and it cut stuff down.
Well, I believe it. I
Yeah.
believe it. Illegal hunting and trespassing are still the same. Illegally trespassing on somebody's property is still the same. And illegal hunting, you know, we can't control that. You know, if somebody wants to go out and think they have the open season on deer in town just
Yeah.
because we have a deer management zone, if they have not gone through these channels, it's still illegal deer hunting in town.
Which is pretty rough.
Yeah.
Normally,
Yeah,
illegal
it's-
deer hunting, the penalties are pretty severe.
Yes. Yeah, and that's, we'll work with that through the DNR. So,
Hey, Chief, just to, so
Yes.
like, and I'm just throwing another hypothetical at you, but if you did have a landowner who had a deer fall on his ground that a hunter took lawfully, and he said, no, I don't want anybody on my ground, what kind of complications does that create for DNR? Because as the hunter, if I take the deer and I can't get the deer, I still gotta call the deer in, even knowing that I took the deer and it's laying, right? I mean, I still gotta
Yeah.
use that tag on that deer, but I can't harvest the deer.
if you can see it, it'd be a different story. We may contact the DNR and say we can see it there that he killed that deer, but you have to take the deer on the property or get permission from that landowner. I believe it's the same out in the county. If you shoot a deer and it runs onto the neighbor's property and dies over there, you know, and that landowner don't want you on there.
Yeah, you still gotta call DNR, I'm just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
How many permits are you looking to do?
They were talking about 300.
300?
300 to start. And then you had a question about does and bucks. We're just trying to, this first year, we're going to see with the does, and we've worked it out with the DNR depredation biologist about how many he thought, and without taking a count, and he said that becomes expensive to do that with a flyover and trying to count in a
Yeah.
year. And he said, we'll do this first year hunt with just does only, and then next year, look at the buck population to see if that's changed or not.
Okay. Any other questions, gang? Thank you, Sergeant. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, next up is number 7, a resolution amending septic hauler fees effective July 1st, 2020. Hi, Mr. Fitting, how are you? I think these next 3 are you, my friend.
We annually increase these fees by what is done with the wastewater charges, 3%. So the table before you in the resolution is a 3% increase from the previous year, and we do that on an annual basis.
All right, and is that any questions on that, guys? No. Moving on to number 8, establishing the solid waste fees effective.
I believe the city manager included in
July
a large memorandum at the start of the budget process, reviewing various issues and pertaining to the solid waste fees. The recommendation was to increase the charge for the various size carts, increased each cost by 25 cents. That's for the cart that the person chooses to get, the 35 to 65 to 95. If they want an additional cart, it goes up for the 65 from $8 a month to $8.25 a month. or for the 95 from the $12 to the $12.25 a month. That quarter increase, 10 cents of that increase is a pass-through. We are going to be charged an additional 10 cents per month per eligible customer for the curbside recycling program. That 10 cents covers the curbside collection of the recyclables. It covers the 24/7 cost operation out to the recycling center, the processing of the recyclables, the marketing of the recyclables, the education program, and the other 15 cents applies to the solid waste programs.
Okay, any questions on that? No? And number 9, resolution approving a purchase of a telescopic boom lift for the wastewater treatment facility.
This is one of those four-wheel drive units that has a telescoping work platform on it that can go up vertically or horizontally or anything in between. It has a basket on there for a man to stand in and position it to enable him to safely access a elevated work zone. And we have a lot of elevated areas to work on at the wastewater treatment plant, inside and outside the buildings. We've been able to, through the years, work on these areas using ladders. We have some small personnel lifts that we also use. They take longer to set up. There's more safety concerns. Certainly, the longer it takes to set these things up, to do them safely, it takes more time. It's less efficient than what this particular unit would be. This price that we have indicated in the memorandum is exceptionally low. It's an unusual circumstance. We did have it in the CIP for next fiscal year for the amount of $63,000. We were notified by one of the pieces of equipment suppliers that they had a cancellation of an order that was made through Genie, the manufacturer, and that they could get that unit for us at an unusually low cost. We compared that to what is referred to as source well cost, which is kind of like one of those conglomerate, one of those co-op type things that have satisfied already the state bidding requirements. And this unit is significantly lower price to us than what if we were to go through that process. So there's a potential savings here of $14,000 by buying it one fiscal year sooner than what we planned on. So we're trying to be opportunistic. I believe the unit is still available at that price. You could expect that it could disappear pretty quickly.
Sure.
But our hopes are that it'll still be there once we get all the paperwork, authorization and the paperwork in place.
Any questions, fellas, guys, gals? Sorry. No? Sounds like we should, it's saving 14 grand, it's saving 14 grand.
Paid for tennis court.
Yeah.
Get a little money out of you for that. All right, I think that's it. Thanks, Don. And then number 10 is public hearing for previously scheduled by the city council, and that was a consideration for consolidated transit grant application, April 20th, 2020. Is that you, Stephanie? No? Okay.
Nick?
This, this public hearing is something we do annually for the transit grant app. In there, it's got FTA and STA funds that we're requesting, and then along with the capital list that we have, and I'll explain more of that one. We have a public hearing on April 20th.
Okay, thank you. No, I assume no one had any questions on that one. Okay, and then next up is the treasurer's report under discussion items.
So in your packet is the February treasurer's report.
So, I mean, just glancing through it, there wasn't anything unusual that stood out. I mean, we have a few large deficit balances that are related to drawdowns to grants and loans, like the Mazel sewer separation. Our FEMA stuff, the only thing we've gotten for the declaration of the flood has been insurance proceeds. We're still working through FEMA, getting FEMA reimbursement, so that's rather large. And then the Tiger grant has a balance too of that. So does anybody have any questions? I didn't
see anything. Anybody have any questions? No?
Okay.
Thanks. Number 2, Chief or Jim, it's COPS grant. Chief.
Yeah, I threw together a little, a few, and it's not in your packet, so, on this COPS hiring program. What I've, I guess, put in an application for, back on March 11th, it was the deadline, so I got it filed before everything that happened here. But it was the COPS hiring program to hire one additional officer, an application that I submitted to make you aware of it. And in here, it's to assist us to prevent and reduce crime and violence. It's kind of the same grant, and I'll kind of go through it here. From 2015, the COPS hiring program award. If you remember that, we hired 2 officers and assigned 2 veteran officers to a POP unit. and the POP unit, of course, is the problem-oriented policing unit. And the creation of that was to identify problem areas and have them respond to that, or to try and get information that was indicative that there was going to be a problem in this area, whether it was a drive-by shooting or someone attempting to commit crimes in these areas. And so that happened in between 2016, when it actually started, up and through the fall of 2019. So we had some successes with that POP unit over that course of time, but I'm looking always for how can it be better and how can we make it better. And as we talked during the budget season, to assign one more officer to that and to the investigations unit working drug crimes. What we find a lot of times is, as we look here, guns and drugs most of the time kind of go together. That we found throughout the last several years and throughout my career, usually those things kind of go hand in hand. I put down here the activity that we got from this grant created a need for what I call data documentation. A lot of times the officers that work the patrol unit will gather intelligence data on their shift or whatever. We found we had no database to put all that information in, so a person could readily go in there and look at that data and say, well, this person's doing that at this time, an officer talked to him at this time, or we met with him at this time, or however, just to kind of track, who's affiliated with who, and work a case that we put together like last November to make those connections and those ties, and do some federal prosecution for a conspiracy, I guess, illegal business. So when we talk about that, the officers, and one of our POP unit officers is kind of doing this, but spends a lot of time taking prosecutions to the federal prosecutor up in Davenport, a lot of time talking to them and building relationships. So that's kind of where that program took us. I still want to maintain those 2 officers that get out in the community and work those hotspot areas. In addition to that, I want a 3rd officer to kind of work that data and be able to put those cases together and prepare them for federal prosecution. So that's kind of what I'm looking at to enhance the POP unit with that 3rd member, which would take our department to 46. And again, he'd be tasked with that organization of the intelligence data to be documented in a model program to utilize to disseminate information to all law enforcement partners. We found that our partners up at Davenport Police Department, I met with the assistant chief up there, and they have a program that they've started up there in their community, which is seeing the same violence and gun activity that we're seeing here. And they have a program up there that he came down and kind of introduced us, and has started some training on that. We just have to get it up and going to get that program to get all the documentation we need there. This bottom part here, I can't tell you how integral that is, those relationship with local, state, and federal prosecutors and maintaining that relationship and preparing those cases. And the reward is to remove somebody from our community that's, doing these violent crimes and getting them sentenced and out of the community for a while until they're rehabilitated and can come back. This is the funding. This is, and I said this is a short presentation, but it's a 3-year program partially funded with an additional fully funded year for the positions. So it's basically a 4-year program, which is the last year's fully funded. The cost share, when we put it into the application, it kind of spits the numbers back out. But overall, the total cost for those 3 years is $268,888 in salary and benefits for an additional officer. The federal share is $125,000, and ours would be $143,889 over the course of 3 years, and this kind of breaks it down as it gradually increases. So, like I said, the last year, fully funded by the city, is the proposal. These percentages are kind of built into the application process, and I don't know how the formula worked to get it to that 46 and 43%. So basically, it's a 50-50 funding opportunity. I just recently received an email, and it's kind of along these same lines for another grant put out by the Department of Justice, a DOJ grant. And this is what that's called, and I have not put an application in for this, but I'm making you aware of that. And it's kind of along the same lines, a mission of reducing crime and improving functioning of the criminal justice system through the support for innovative and evidence-based policing practices, more effective information sharing, and multi-agency collaboration, which will help us working with our federal partners. The application deadline for that is May 12th. I have not submitted that application yet. I have kind of looked at it, and it's kind of tailored along the same lines with what I want to do with this COPS funding. Things to consider. I don't know if we're going to be awarded this grant that I submitted on March 11th. I don't know when they're going to let us know and what the impact's going to be from the COVID-19 pandemic, how it's going to alter the grant funding opportunities, if they may change this, if it's going to affect the one that I've already put application in for. And this is the other consideration. Will we be able to fund the local share, which could economically impact our budget? I anticipate under the 2015 COPS grant was made application for in 2015, was awarded later in 2015. We actually didn't start drawing down funds until 2016, so it went into the next fiscal year. So this could potentially go into the next fiscal year to begin then for us here as the city. And this is the last question I have. Should we submit for an application for the last grant that I showed you? So with that, that's the presentation as a whole. So I'll leave it at that
So
for questions.
the last grant, would that just be, that would be for an additional officer as well?
I would, yeah, not for an additional one on the top of the one with the COPS grant. I would just probably apply for that also. Just if I didn't get one, I would get the other.
Oh, I see.
But I'm kind of hesitating because all this,
Hedging your bet, yeah.
yeah, all this has come about now since March 11th, and I don't know whether that funding is going to be there for our match share or our portion of it as a city.
Questions?
I mean, this would help in our goal to eventually hire another police officer, but it's not a permanent source of funding, so things are going to be difficult.
And it's not 100%. It's basically that 50-50 split.
Right.
You saw the numbers
Yeah,
that
it's
were
'cause
there.
I'd like to think that if we get through this year, we'd be able to generate the benefit, with sales tax dollars.
It's something to consider, and the application's in. They have not sent me anything back awarding me that grant yet, but I wanted to make you aware of it. So
See if we get it.
when it does come up later and if they announce an award, you know why I'm standing in front of
Okay.
you, and then you can make a decision and we can decide then yes or no.
Okay.
To take the grant. It's not good for us to apply for it unless we
Intend to
Serious
take it.
about
I
intend to
got
take
that.
it, and that's why I'm hesitant on the second one. I'm kind of dragging my feet a little bit on that and looking at that May 10th, but if you have any suggestions on that, and I could call a few people and see if that opportunity is still going to be available, and I'm curious if they're going to pull it out from under us because of the other packages that they've just recently voted on to help curtail some of the expenses with the pandemic.
Hey, Chief, do you know what the share would be under the other grant?
I do not know.
Okay.
No, and this one here, I had kind of an idea from the previous COPS grant. It was basically a 50-50 or 40-60 is what it ended up with, the 2015, I believe. And Jim, maybe you know better than I, but if you remember back. But I think it was right at that 40-60 over the course of the 3 years of the previous one.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, next is citywide cleanup, Mr. Fitty.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're gonna run this for me though, aren't you? Okay, thank you. I always like to make sure there's gonna be one person awake, hopefully. Okay, so once again, I'm before you pertaining to solid waste programs. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the citywide cleanup. So the first slide is the typical slide I start the presentation with. We do want to encourage people to recycle. The lid of your cart is supposed to be fully closed, and you can accomplish a lot if you utilize the recycling programs that are available locally, and you're paying for them. They're built into your trash line item. Next line. Next slide. So the proposed change that I wanted to make was taking the citywide cleanup as is right now and turning it into a bulky item program only. Next slide. Well, back the truck up. Something has happened here recently everybody knows about. We have this COVID-19 global health pandemic, circumstance that has arisen. And according to OSHA, solid waste workers are at elevated risk due to this pandemic. The virus can persist on surfaces, and that's according to the World Health Organization. They're uncertain exactly for how many hours or for how many days the virus can exist on various types of surfaces. But we do know that it's transmittable from the surface to a person can become infected if they're touching their mouth, if it touch their nose, they touch their eyes. It's common for people to touch their face without even be fully aware of it. And that, again, that's a fact that's out there due from the CDC. Next slide. So I got information from Angie Vaughn, safety director. She found some information that said 3 hours can exist 3 hours, up to 3 hours in airborne droplets, up to 72 hours on hard, shiny surfaces, up to 24 hours on porous surfaces. And I asked the question at the time that I got that information, which was only today, well, what's the source? You may know that a lot of information that's out on the internet pertaining to the COVID-19, some of it's reliable, some's not so reliable, you just don't really know. Things are always changing, they're discovering new things all the time. And in fact, when I asked about the question about, well, where did this information come from, she did reply back to me. And she said the information is from the National Institute of Health. It's become, and there has been agreement between the National Institute of Health with the other organizations such as the Center for Disease Control, CDC, and for the WHO, World Health Organization. They've all kind of come to an agreement that these numbers are fairly reliable. But again, things are being learned and changing all the time. They have scientists that are doing work on this all the time. But one thing's for sure, they are sure that people may acquire the virus through the air and after touching contaminated surfaces. Next slide. So my response to this COVID-19 circumstance that has arisen is I want to cancel the citywide cleanup for 2020. And the things that I've taken in consideration due to the nature of our program, the type of citywide cleanup program we have, there's an increased potential for exposure. We've heard over and over again through the last few weeks all the steps that governmental bodies, politicians, scientists are saying you need to do this to reduce the likelihood of the pandemic from being spread, the virus from being spread. Take all of these steps. In our program, we set specific dates and we set out specific locations where the citywide cleanup program is active. We get called regularly by people asking us, when's the program start? Where is Monday's trash route? Where can I work the curb or the alley for the citywide cleanup material? These we have termed scavengers. So scavengers come in, they dig through the material that's set out. The material that's been set out, which can be contaminated with the virus. It could be the citizen who set it out that contaminated the material. It could be a scavenger who comes from within the city limits, from outside the city limits, from outside the state to go through the treasures that are set out at the curb and at the alley. They dig through the material. Another group of scavengers comes in, they dig through that same material. The residents are charged with cleaning up after the mess that the scavengers have created. And then, of course, there are the city employees and the temporary laborers that we hire that handle that same material. Next slide. So, my concern is not only for the workers, which I think that you've seen a notice that was included in the packet where Waste Management, a national, international waste firm, canceled their citywide cleanup program for the city of Galesburg, for which they provide solid waste services. And their expressed reason is concern for the health and safety of their workers who are performing work in that program. That's actually what I would consider boilerplate language. In my emails at work, I'm regularly receiving same type of language from suppliers of services and equipment that we deal with on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, out of concern for our employees. But I think our program goes beyond protecting our employees. I think it also includes dealing with the scavengers and the citizens themselves. And I think that it's in concert with all the protective measures that are being taken by cities, by companies, to protect the public, to protect their employees. And so I'm coming to you and saying that I believe that we should cancel this year's citywide cleanup because of the existing circumstances. I started out with the reason to change the program, and in the meantime, this has come forward. So that's my initial presentation. I am prepared to go on and talk about changes to the program, whether that be this year or whether that be in the future. We ultimately do send out a newsletter in June. It's called the Waste Paper, where we set forth solid waste programs for the next fiscal year. Citywide cleanup historically has been one of them that has been discussed and identified. And this current year's waste paper, which has yet to expire, had language in there saying that the citywide cleanup program was under review, possibly to turn to a bulky item program, and we would hope to know sometime in the month of March of 2020 what the spring program, if anything, would look like. And I am prepared to move on to talk about that if you'd like to do that.
Well, this, for me, anyway, at this time, I see the wisdom of at least postponing. I'm not sure if I want to cancel it. And that postponement might last till fall. We normally did a fall one, didn't we?
We did have 2 programs a year. I think it's probably been somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 years ago, maybe, that we discontinued that. It was typically what it would do is it would come the week following, is it Labor Day in September? We have a holiday week, which we're picking up 5 days worth of garbage in 4 days. And then that program would start, and it would take 6 weeks to complete that program. And then it would immediately go into the LEAF program. And then that would run for, well, now it's running for 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
One of the weeks is during Thanksgiving week, and we don't pick up leaves. But we go into the first full week of December. The only problem I have with delaying the program and redoing it or doing it in the fall is that when we have non-program weeks, that's when the guys tend to plan vacations, whether it's for the individual or the couple or for the family. Of course, by that time, school has started, so families typically aren't going to be taking vacations. But you know, we've gotten used to, over the last 6 years, of having that time slot available for people to plan and schedule vacations.
I'm with you, John. I think we just postpone it. The only other suggestion I would make above and beyond that is, I know one of the other services is people can take their things to the landfill during that period of time and dispose of it on their own. I would ask that we still allow that during the spring period, and then we would do the pickup in the fall.
Well, I think what you're referring to is, at one time, we allowed people to go in and get their material in free of charge, as long as they transported themselves and they showed that they were showing their water bill. And at that time, we were creating quite a bit of congestion and difficulty at the landfill that was interfering both with the commercial haulers and the normal haulers that would use the facility. They have one single way in and shares that same way out over one scale. And they were having a lot of difficulties, and they had conflicts at the working face where the people were. And they approached the city to ask if they would, and actually through the commission, to discontinue the allowance of people taking it in free. They can take it in and pay the minimum $10 fee based on the weight of material, and that has never gone away. They have that. But when the free self-haul disappeared, the lines disappeared.
When did we eliminate the self-haul, the free?
I would say it's probably been 3, possibly 4 years ago.
I didn't even know that.
They're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
They can pay the $10 fee, minimum fee, and that means if they have one bag of garbage, it's $10 to get it into the landfill. $10 is equivalent to 375 pounds worth of trash. So that's quite a bit of material.
Don, I am not in favor of discontinuing the program. I think with the virus, people are going through closets, they're going through basements, there's going through garages, there's gonna be a plethora of stuff. And we have asked our constituents to do a lot. We have asked them to switch their carts out. We've asked them, some of them, to change the location of the placement of the carts. We've asked them to discontinue putting their leaves in the carts. We've increased the fee by a quarter. I don't think we can push one more thing and totally discontinue this program. I think people are gonna be really irritated at us. They love this program, Dawn. I know you don't, I know your staff doesn't, and I understand the safety guards you wanna put in place, but I think we should table it and put it later on in the year. I think people still love and wanna embrace this program.
Yeah, I'm okay with delaying it this year, given the current circumstances, but I'm not in favor of eliminating the program.
Well, as I said, I've got a presentation to talk about what the options that I felt the program should be. Before this COVID-19 thing came up, I was still looking at making changes and why I was wanting to make those changes.
Why don't we do this? I'm postponed, Robert, Bill, but we're here, so we can go through your proposed changes. That gives us some time to consider that. I will echo what Matt and Linda say, though. I'm for keeping it. This is one of the issues that I've probably received more calls on than anything, is the potential of losing that.
It's interesting, such a simple thing as solid waste. I mean, something, there was a statement made once that trash is trash. How difficult can it be? It is difficult because it affects a major portion of the community.
It does. It really does. And so
Specifically asked today by a citizen, please don't get rid of the citywide thing.
Well, let me make let me go through my slides real quick. I'm sorry, go
I'm gonna
ahead.
bow out. I have a 2-year-old that has a birthday party in 10 minutes, so we'll talk to
Happy
you guys later.
birthday.
we're ready to go through
Okay.
this. It's that way we can consider it.
So, the next slide, is what I would say is the definition of a bulky item. Single item in and of itself that does not fit into a 33-gallon garbage bag. Examples, mattresses, box springs, so on and so forth. The last line, bulky items are items that are not easily transported by the average household. I mean, if you have a pickup truck, you can move a bulky item, but if you have a car, a lot of cars, you're not gonna be able to move a bulky item. Okay, next slide. So then, the next slide talks about those things that under the proposed change in the program would no longer be accepted as free. These would be non-bulky items. And again, the last portion that's underlined, all of which would fit into a 33-gallon bag by themselves or along with other items, and/or they could be easily transported, loaded into the trunk of a car and be handled themselves. Next slide. So why discontinue the current citywide cleanup program? It's in concert with the philosophy of pay as you throw. In the late 80s, the city council, you had one fee and we took everything. In the early 90s, the city council, again, one fee, take everything, but suddenly things started to become restricted as far as what could go in the landfill. Grass, leaves, and such could not be buried at the work face. Wood waste could not be buried at the working face. So and that actually required a special fee. Next slide. Things like tires, batteries were restricted by an outside entity and required a special fee. They did not want them in the working face of the landfill. Appliances were restricted by an outside entity that required a special fee. So for all these things, besides grass and leaves, all these other things, if you wanted to get rid of it, you paid to get rid of it. In the mid-90s, the city council adopted a pay-as-you-throw. It was called the bag and tag program, which was kind of misnomer, but basically it was a volume-based program. The more you threw away, the more you paid to get rid of it, because you had to buy those trash tags and pay that on top of your base fee. In the early 2000s, an outside entity made it illegal to put electronics in with screens, and it required a special fee. Next slide. In concert with the philosophy of pay as you throw, in the late 2018, the city council here created the tiered cart program. Staff had proposed one single size cart for everybody, And the council wanted, no, we want a tiered program so you pay on the basis of how much you generate and you're throwing away. That was the city's council desire, and so we have a 35, a 65, and a 95-gallon cart program, each one with a different monthly fee. So there's really only two, next slide, there's only two remaining specialty programs that are outside the pay-as-you-throw philosophy that has been ingrained in the city. That's the LEAF program, and that's the citywide cleanup program. Next slide. Our current staffing is we have 7 full-time drivers, with 1 being the lead driver, and we have 1 part-time driver. When we carry on the specialty programs, the LEAF program and the citywide cleanup, we rely on temporary help to help us get those programs done. Carrying out the citywide cleanup program at the same time as our daily collection of garbage requires reliable, available, supplemental workforce if the program's to be carried out safely and efficiently. It seems, for whatever reason, it's getting harder and harder to find people who are willing to come in and work side by side with our people in those programs. If we wanted to use full-time employees from other departments, well, then we have a captured audience, a captured workforce. But historically, we relied on hiring people from the outside for our programs. We've made changes to our program equipment, going to the carts. We have these semi-automated tippers. That does save on lifting, but the downside is it is actually slower than just dealing with bags. We have the fully automated arm. The system that we bought does allow us to pick up bulky items, at least many of the bulky items, and use it. Most of your fully automated trucks cannot pick up, but the truck we do have has some capabilities in that area. Next slide. So I'm proposing that we replace the current citywide cleanup program with option 1 would be a citywide cleanup program which becomes a bulky item program only. We'd still have the program dates, we'd still have the routes identified, and during the program you could set out bulky items as defined earlier in the presentation, and you would not have to put tags on them just as it is now. Outside of the program dates, if you had a bulky item, you'd have to put trash tags on it just as you do now. The difference would be that tags would be required for the non-bulky items year-round. Now, some people might decide, and we have, our biggest percentage of changes of carts are to go from the 35 to the 65, or to go from the 65 to 95, because they don't want to pay for those $4 trash tags. And so if we were to make this change, I could see there might be an onslaught of carts, the 35s being changed to a larger cart. And then they could get rid of citywide cleanup material anytime throughout the year because they have the space to put it in their cart. They don't have to wait for a spring or a fall program. They can get rid of it on a regular basis. Option 2, the next slide. Same as option number 1, except it's got a little bit of a twist. Again, during the program dates and the routes, they could set out their bulky items free of charge, no tags. But outside of the program, I've heard some suggestion of can we have special pickup, where some household has a special pickup desired. They go to City Hall, they pay a fee, and we set a date and a time where we go and we pick it up and take that material away. But you got a phone call, they got to make a phone call to schedule it. It's more handling. So that's a sad face. And again, the same thing goes for small items. Year-round, you'd have to put tags on things. Next slide. Option 3 would be having no program at all, and you would go with a pay-as-you-throw year-round program mirroring our solid waste program changes that have been made through the years. You pay based on what you get rid of. There'd be no designated dates for citywide cleanup, and the tags would be required for anything and everything that is outside of your cart. Again, it may encourage people to go to a larger cart. Also, it would remove the incentive for people to hoard things, which I do know people do hoard things for the current program right now. Whether they store it in their basement, they store it in their garage, they store it in their backyard, they pile it up, and we call the nuisance department to come deal with this nuisance that's there. And the city manager pointed out to me that I did not have a fourth option, which is no change at all, which I've heard comments about. You know, let's keep it as is. Well, there's a sad face showing there. You have nuisance piles before the program. I mean, we tell people don't put the stuff out more than a week ahead. People start setting stuff out 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead of time, and the neighbors call and they complain about the material sitting out there. You have nuisance piles during the program. You have nuisance piles after the program. You have scavengers. And when you have scavengers, that equals piles of unprepared material. And when it's unprepared material, we don't pick it up. The person calls, they complain about, you didn't pick up my stuff. We say, your pile's not prepared. My pile was prepared. People came by and tore it up. So then we're saying, well, we're sorry, we're not going to pick it up. Citywide cleanup materials with the carts. People will be having their piles sitting in front of the carts, and we're going to have a hard time getting to carts. Do we leave the carts? Do we walk around and get the carts? It's going to be a problem for us, certainly for the fully automated truck. Use of community project allowance, plus a smiley face and a sad face. We get, I think it's 26,000 some odd dollars allowance from the Solid Waste Commission for community project allowances. The fees that, or the tonnage that we take in under the citywide cleanup program does get charged against that. I believe the nuisance department has had the opportunity to use some of those funds for various projects that they have take place throughout the city. If we don't have a citywide cleanup program, that means there's that much more money for them for using for specialty projects or for organizations in the city who want to approach City Hall and say, we'd like to do this project. Can we get rid of the waste that is generated by this project under the community project allowance? Recycle, reuse. I know that the comment's been made, look at all the stuff that's going to be able to be reused and recycled by allowing the scavengers to come through. That's true. But in a minute, I'm going to point to all the other options where these things can be taken rather than being set out at the curbside or the alley. They can be recycled. They can be reused. It's just a different way of getting it done. Same thing goes for the source of income. Some of the scavengers undoubtedly rely on citywide cleanup material, their treasures that they find, and they turn around and they put them in their garage sales and they resell them. Or they take them to their place of business and they sell them. That's a source of income. But again, these other places that deal with materials that are brought to them and donated, they too survive by selling those materials and to the community and to people who need them. And then finally, there's, of course, the entertainment value. That's a plus for some people, but for those people who have their piles torn into and distributed and just rummaged through, that is not very entertaining. They do not enjoy that at all. Next slide. So, what are the alternatives to using the citywide cleanup program as is? People can donate their items. They donate the items that are in good working condition, contain all their pieces of parts, free of stains, rips, and best way to ensure that your throwaways do the most good. Accepted items include clothes, common item that's thrown away, furniture, common item that's thrown away, and household items are common items that are thrown away during citywide cleanup. Alternatives, Goodwill. There's a Goodwill store on West Burlington Avenue. They're open Mondays through Fridays, 9 to 9. I don't know if they are right now during the COVID-19.
I know,
but
hopefully yours is accepting things right now.
They have Goodwill. Next slide. Hopefully yours, thrift store downtown. They have a lot of things that are used materials. There's the next slide, the Salvation Army. They take materials. Next slide. And of course, if you don't have anything that has of any value and it's just not worth your time taking it there, you can take it to the landfill. And again, at $10, you can get rid of $375 worth of, or 375 pounds worth of stuff, as opposed to buying $4 trash tags. Next slide. Now, I haven't made these suggestions just off the hip. I mean, I've thought about different things that should be considered. The goals of having gone to carts. We wanted to reduce nuisances. Citywide cleanup creates a lot of nuisances. People hoarding things creates a lot of nuisances. Another thing we were trying to do with the carts is we were trying to reduce the wear and tear. Limit the number of bulky items per household. Some communities actually have free pickup of bulky items, and they allow you like 3 times a year you can have a bulky item or items picked up at your curbside. I don't like that because we're talking about a lot of phone calls and a lot of keeping the data and keeping track of all that stuff. That could be a pain in the neck. Designated dates attract scavengers. Again, your smiley faces and sad faces. They create a lot of headaches for people. Designated dates allow planning for supplemental staff needs. There is a benefit to having a scheduled program because then we can schedule to have extra help to help us deal with those extra materials. Community project allowance funds, use affected. Again, I don't know how much additional funds would help nuisance department. I know there's been past, and I don't know if it's recently, it's got to be coupled with, they have an account that they had money to tear down a house. The debris from that house could go in and, as a project, community project, and get all that goes into landfill under that dollars that's not being spent for citywide cleanup. But again, you got to have the money available to tear down the house. It's a loss of service. You're right. It's a loss of service, which doesn't make people happy. I think that if people look at the cost of our program, our cost of our program is very, very reasonable. $3, come July 1st, $3.95 of the trash line item is for the recycling program, whether you use it or not. You subtract that off the cost for the cart. We provide a very reasonable service when you figure the garbage. People can take wood waste in and get it taken to the landfill. And we pick up the leaves in the spring for 3 weeks, and we pick up the leaves in the fall for 7 weeks. All for that monthly fee. And I think it's a very reasonable cost. Yes, so there would be a loss of service, but so be it. Now, another negative thing is if people said, hey, I'm going to have to get a bigger cart because I want to get rid of my small items that no longer are part of citywide cleanup. Well, we've got a $35 exchange fee currently in place that says if you want to change your size of your cart, you got to pay $35 up front. We've had a lot of people pay that $35 because they don't want to buy those $4 trash tags, and the size cart they have just isn't getting the job done. Too bad we didn't start with one size cart in the beginning. If citywide cleanup program is eliminated entirely, perhaps it would consider reducing the number of tags that are required for bulky items. Take away something, give something. I mean, we have a chart that's in our waste paper that says if you want to get rid of this bulky item, at any time of the year, you put this number of tags on it. Maybe we reduce the number of tags, and we say, well, one tag for anything, regardless whether it's a couch or a mattress or a lamp or whatever, a table, it's one tag. I don't know what that would do to our revenue stream, but that's another thing that we could possibly do. So there's a lot of things we could do that would maybe soften the blow of making a change to the citywide cleanup program. The final slide is my favorite, except I added a little bit, hold the COVID-19 please. I shouldn't, but I'm going to have the garbage. I like that slide. So that's my pitch
Okay, all right.
to see a change made to the citywide cleanup program. And as I said, the COVID-19 threw a big curve at me because I thought, you know, I don't think we should be doing the citywide cleanup program during this quote-unquote pandemic.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess that's where I'm at right now, is we're gonna put everything on hold and see where we're at, and we'll have to revisit the issue at some point in time, and eventually we'll have to decide, okay, it's too late to have a spring, summer, we'll just have one, possibly. I don't know. We don't know where it's gonna go, so.
I think another option here is to prohibit scavenging and just not allow that.
I don't think you can enforce it.
I don't think you can
Generally, in the
control
dark
that.
of night with flashlights, the
I don't think
police
you can
would
control
not
that.
be happy with that.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. One of the options that I like, Dawn, and I loved your presentation, by the way. You presented a lot of pros and cons, and I like the smiley and unhappy faces for those of us that have had a long day. We appreciate that. I like the option of someone being able to phone in and say, I've had a death in the family and I have a lot of garbage, or I'm moving and I have a lot of garbage. And I really don't think it would be excessive. I fail to think that this would be just monstrous amounts of people that would use this. But over the years, what I personally have witnessed, and I can't speak for everyone else, but with the larger carts, when we do have bulk trash day, there's very little left out. I think people are disposing of it early. So I do see that in the long term, your plan to get away with the bulk trash program may be working, because I just don't see as much set out. I don't know, I can't speak for the rest of you. But I would hate for someone to have a lot of garbage and not have a way to easily get rid of it. I see that as a benefit.
Well, I would say that I've heard more than one time from my crews, Don, you need to invite the council to come on a truck during citywide cleanup and see exactly what it is that we deal with on the day-to-day basis during the citywide cleanup. What is typically seen are areas where there is little or, you know, smaller piles, curbside, going into the alleys, which is about 50% of our routes. They said you need to have them come and go with us to see exactly how much material and what kind of stuff that we're dealing with.
Yeah, you know, and this is food for thought. I would, if I was gonna do anything, I would probably look at the bulky item. Because you should be able to either recycle, or reuse. It's been amazing to me to see when those piles are out there, clothing and all that stuff that should be disposed of during the year, you know, heck, hopefully yours will even come pick it up. So, but the bulky items where a person doesn't have a pickup and the text, I'm on the same wave with you there. Because the one thing I don't like is when you see a recliner on the front step and you know no one's sitting in it, they're just waiting to throw it away. So, you know, it's a nuisance issue, but I think, you know, for sure it's going to be postponed at least, and we'll revisit that issue. But you've given some good arguments to consider some changes to it. Citizens are calling, of course, you know, they don't like change, and we've made a lot of changes to the trash program. That doesn't mean further changes aren't coming, but if I was gonna do anything, it'd probably be the bulky item only. I'm just giving my 2 cents right now for where I'm at. Rather than all the little stuff that they could put in their cart, even a 35-gallon cart, if a person is not generating a lot of trash, those carts are still pretty good size. I mean, I can get a lot of stuff in mine and shut the lid. But right now, I would say for sure it's postponed. And then we'll have to revisit it a month, maybe later and see.
Well, as I said, we publish what we call the waste paper,
Right.
and that typically goes out in mid-June.
Yeah.
And typically, the intent is to identify all the solid waste programs for the upcoming fiscal year. If you're talking about delaying the program, I would say that is when, we would try to get that in there.
I would
So
agree.
educating the public and getting information out is not an easy matter.
No, it's not.
It's not. And again,
But if
originally my intent was to change the program.
Yep.
And then this added issue has arisen. So there's also that issue too, which I'm, if we're going to do a program, I guess I think the spring is people have a mindset
Yeah,
of
spring
spring
clean, yeah.
spring cleaning. That's when even if we eliminate the program, I would fully expect that in the months during spring, we would probably see an increase in uptick of bulky items
Right.
and other trash because people have that mindset.
Can we still do the dumpsters down by the riverfront like Eric used to do?
I don't know what Eric's plans or if they've given any thought to that whatsoever.
We've done that on a manual basis the last 4 or 5 years, so
Yeah,
unless something major change, we continue that.
Because that was a nice option too for people, because I agree with the hoarding. People wait.
Whether that maybe that program could be looked at as a means to deal with citywide cleanup right now for this spring.
That's what I'm thinking, yes.
And whether it could be expanded
Because they could put it in
whatever.
a car, that they
Yeah.
could, and maybe that's something we look at. They could
Contaminate
put,
your workers so much. I'm
Right.
sorry, I interrupted.
oh, that's all right. They could put it in a car, that like if it was smaller items like that and they couldn't fit in a trash can, they might be able to fit it. I would say we would, what's this, basically 1st of April, because the other thing is I don't want to throw all of a sudden a program on you and you don't have any time to prepare. I would say that.
Trash is trash.
I know, but you still have to have personnel, so I would say that, it's gonna be April 30th before, right now,
Well, normally we would start the program on Monday, the 13th, the day
Right.
after Easter,
Right.
because what we need is 6 weeks, and then we would be in Memorial Day holiday week, and then you're into the summer.
Yeah, I would
And that's
say,
typically what we do.
I would say we probably need to circle back and look at it around the end of April and talk about it once again.
When does your waste paper go to press? When's your deadline to get that?
Oh,
date
we
in there?
usually try to get it to the printer sometime by the second week of June, I would say, at the very
We
latest.
should know something by then.
Yeah, and then we, they had the city dumpsters, how did we, I don't remember how we did
We
that.
had about 5 or 6 of them down by the river, and people drove up.
Spring, is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think, are you talking about spring or in fall?
I
I
think
can't
we're just
remember what time
discussing at
period
this
we
point.
did it. I just remember.
You did it in the fall typically,
I
right?
participated.
Well, we have to have staff there to check water bills and
Okay.
manage it, and then
So there is a cost, they don't just sit there. I couldn't remember because I haven't utilized it, so.
we have to coordinate with the hauler to come in and bring it out and use the landfill
Okay.
trash. But then we have to pay for the actual labor and hours for that too.
Yeah, so it's not
The landfill tipping, I think.
Not a free thing to.
it's not a free thing to do. Okay.
So where are we? We're gonna get back together again?
I think we're
or
gonna get back-
Somehow as
I-
a discussion item and once again, or?
I think we're gonna my recommendation would be postpone. We get to the end of April, first part of May, we'll discuss it again. That gives everybody time on the council to look at your options. We can see what happens with the COVID-19, and then we can make a decision from there. But in the meantime, we could put an announcement that it's been postponed.
Well, we're
And
gonna we field calls.
You're gonna field calls, but if we put it on city sites, Facebook sites,
Yeah, we
whatever.
can do that.
Hey, now is the time to start using your small items, can go in your trash cans. Put your small items in your trash cans, because we are not sure if we're going to have a spring, summer cleanup. We don't know. Because if this drags into July, which it could very well be, then we're gonna look at a fall program. There's no reason to do two close together. So if we do the postponement announcement and we put our re-education materials out there as far as, here's what you can throw away in your trash can now, and here's your options for reuse, maybe that helps.
We have not discontinued bulky items set out with the trash tags.
Sure.
Not, we don't get a lot of call for it, but we do pick those items up.
Yeah.
Where are those trash tags available right now? Someone asked me that. Here?
They're available at the grocery
stores.
stores, that, I don't know, if is it True Value on 9th and Angular?
Yep, they have it.
I believe they have them at the gas stations. I've heard that there's still some of the orange tags floating around out there, which
They have to
really
double those up.
surprises me. But those are only $2 tags, and what we're talking about are $4
Yeah.
tags. So the yellow tags are 4, or 2 orange tags
And right now,
would make
people
up that.
Put out an extra bag because of what's going on, correct?
Yes, you put that program in place. And I asked the guys today, at the end of the day, well, did anybody take advantage of it? I would not expect very many people this early, because getting the news out there, the
Yeah, it's
information,
tough.
is not easy to do. They did say mostly what they saw of any extra trash were 33-gallon cans containing stuff that had been in those cans for ages and ages, and really a lot of heavy stuff, not very few extra bags that were set out, absent trash tags. But it's early. Today was the first day. I don't know what the next day or next week will bring. But there were a lot of people that, the people that did something were taking advantage by setting out 33-gallon cans with stuff that looked like they'd been in there for a long time. That's the type of stuff they were seeing.
Okay. Well, so that's, is that where we're at then? We're gonna look at it again. We'll give you plenty of time. Thanks, Don.
Thanks.
All right. Next up would be committee appointments. It looks like we have several people that are looking to be reappointed. On the City Planning Commission, it's Brian Boss. On the Low Rent Housing Agency, it is Dick Mellinger to a two-year term. Parks Advisory Committee is J. Brian Schulte, and then the Tree Advisory Board has 3 people, Lisa Locke, Joyce Tager, and Kelly Rundall. They're all looking for reappointments. Does council have any questions with those? No. Okay, future discussion items, do we need to discuss those, really? Okay, we just keep pushing that down the road until we get some people here. Anything else from staff? Don? Jim?
We're in a new world with our meeting tonight was different than normal. Doors locked. We had, we'll push out a phone number. We had one person who dialed in just briefly, but the nature of a work session, there isn't counsel or communication from the public anyway,
Right.
so that really wasn't an
It'll be a little
issue.
more
But
difficult
we do,
Monday.
as much for this work session, that was to provide an alternative means of listening in on the meeting. COVID-19 has created just different ways of needing to do things, and it does need to be noted during the meeting that, the reason that we're doing things the way we are is a result of the emergency that we're under. The process that we're under, we have some recommendations at both the state and federal level for no more than 10 people for a meeting, which makes the dynamics of trying to have open meetings difficult. We still will continue to, as we have in the past, we are on cable. We are able to be viewed online through our website, and then the call-in number. Now that call-in number next time will be a little bit. We'll see how the dynamic works. Where we have several public hearings, I imagine that most of those are going to be public hearings that only 1 or 2 people are concerned in the given topic. We may have an item that does demand more, and we kind of expect a little bit of confusion if we have multiple people who are trying to talk at the same time. And I just hope that people understand there will be delays and some confusion with how to do it. The agenda had another item with an outside party to be on this agenda tonight. Just trying to figure out the dynamics of even what's the structure of this supposed to be. We decided to put that off and delay it. But we will have to do something different as we move forward. We can't have no outside entities participating and making their presentations and being able to be a part of the conversation. If this goes on at the level of where President Trump put it over the weekend, as he said this was through April, and even left the avenue open and it may extend beyond that. We are under different times. We've had a lot of different changes. Not only have we seen the change that we've proposed with the postponement of citywide cleanup, we've talked about the need to get playgrounds marked for, you got one of those, Eric? Yeah, the playground closed. Our parks are still open for walking through, but the equipment itself is closed, and that's a push from the state level, statewide, to have all equipment closed, just for the ability to pass on germs from one person to the next and trying to maintain some level of trying to stop the spread.
That's right now, but signage will go up as for
We don't,
tomorrow.
yeah, there isn't signage out there. We just did this announcement for closure today. Now, as it says, until further notice, this is very similar to a lot of other things. The governor has put most of her recommendations out. I think it's through April 7 at this point, and by the end of this week is anticipated to make a decision whether to extend or let it expire at the April 7 deadline. My suspicion, just based off of what's happened at a federal level, is that would be extended. But a lot of our closures are based on where does it fit within the state and federal pieces. So we have anything that we've closed, whether it's a city hall, whether it's a depot, senior center, any auditorium, any of these facilities, we'll be watching what happens with the continuation of time with the different recommended closure orders. I just saw where Virginia has a stay in place now through June. So you're going to see this different states on different timelines, and we just don't know what happens as this moves forward. So as we've talked about closures, I think that some of those were through the end of March. They'll be extended beyond that, at least through the April 7 timeline for those buildings, and likely beyond that, depending on how this goes forward. We've maintained our transit system. Ridership is way down. That's not too surprising if you look at transportation across the state. Vehicular traffic is down 50% statewide. So to see our transit down, that's not a huge surprise. Vicky with vehicle enforcement downtown isn't doing that. I think that was listed. That's been on a weekly basis, and so she's not working a full schedule at this point. And transit isn't working a full schedule, even though the buses are running, we're not running full routes. So we have some people in those different positions that are down on hours. We're maintaining those positions at 2/3 pay as to keep them on the system, and that's kind of they also have what's listed through the federal government, the first 80 hours for those that have a COVID-19 related issue. First 80 hours are fully paid. So we're working employees through that system as well. We've had people who've had to not show for work for various levels of sickness, just trying to make sure that we no one tested positive for anything, but just to make sure that we're doing our best not to spread germs with given situations. I don't know if I have anything else that I kind of need to update with what's going on.
On the playground, so we're just gonna put the signs up, or we're gonna put maybe some caution tape around them, or what are you planning on doing?
The signs, caution tape, is we've seen before when we've had to do stuff.
They just tear it off,
tear
yeah.
But we'll
It,
get signs at every single playground.
Yeah, I was-
Two of the more busy ones, and then
Okay.
try and get the word out.
I was in Quincy this last week and they had it on all their stuff, so it's just,
We did some
stinks.
research, Iowa City, Des Moines, Dubuque, they have signage similar to this.
Okay,
They're-
all right.
so.
And then put it on the websites and
Yeah.
stuff, so.
yeah, I have seen some that have used tape, but it's hard, especially a bigger structure that's open.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Well, it's not
accomplish a
gonna
whole lot
prevent it,
more
yeah.
than just a sign.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that people work with us. We're all trying to work together on this
Yeah.
stuff, so.
You should probably put, not only a playground, but picnic tables. Right? I hate to say it, but,
I think families could go eat.
well, you would think, but
Yeah,
that they don't
let's not
clean
take
up after
everything away.
themselves, no one's sterilizing. Anyway, is that all you had, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. Eric, did you have anything else?
Just,
Stephanie, do you have anything? Rich, give you a chance to fire away. So, all right, council, you got anything, Bill?
Just stay safe and stay healthy.
Linda?
Echo what Bill said, stay in place to help erase illness, and then also be sure and support our local businesses. They're hurting too. If you can, go through a drive-through, maybe get some food to go, eat it with your family, unless John takes the picnic tables away from you, you can go to the park and eat. So,
I'm not doing it.
everybody stay safe.
COVID-19 is. Yeah, I talked to a couple of merchants that were closed this last order by the governor, and they're making efforts to do online business. You can't get anything shipped by Amazon anyway, so you might as well, take advantage of our merchants working hard. One thing I would say, and this is a little bit of admonishment, I've been very proud of the citizens of Burlington and how they've complied and worked hard to try to do the stay at home but if you're going to the grocery store or a store because you have to go, leave your kids at home. They're definitely susceptible to this. If there's two parents and, one of you volunteers stay home with your kid, don't take them to the store. I was at Hy-Vee and Aldi's yesterday because we had to go, we had to replenish, and it was disappointing to me to see people walking around with their kids. They need to keep them safe. So, and also respect the fact that a lot of the merchants are having extra special hours for the senior citizens or those at risk. Respect those times as well, please. But other than that, I think Burlington's been doing a pretty good job complying.
Yeah, I actually want to shout out for Chase Gibbs there at the Buffalo and Coal House. He started a Venmo account to, people were asking how they donate food to first responders or to medical providers, and he started this thing up, and I can't remember what the dollar amount was. It might have been like $6,000 or $7,000 that people donated, and he's like, we're gonna have to pump the brakes a little bit. It's gonna take me a week to get this much food out. So thank you everybody that's participating in that and thinking of other people during this difficult time. That's kind of what we do in Burlington and Iowa, and I think that's sets the bar pretty high for the kind of people that we are, and for people watching us and seeing how we're making it through a difficult time. It's good to represent.
All right, I think that's it. Let's get out of here. Thank you.